Hi
you guys.
Happy Friday.
Hey, for sure.
So who's here? Say hey. How is everyone doing? I hope you've had a great week. Welcome to our KT Kids lesson today. But welcome to all of our children and our adults and our young adults and our youth who are hopping on today for our very courageous conversation. So today we're going to be talking about Black Lives Matter. We're going to be talking about why your life is important, why what we're seeing on TV and on social media is actually biblical, and why it is required for us to get involved and to get engaged in our communities to better our world, not just for us, but for the future. All right. So I'm going to start with our scripture today. And our scripture is Micah chapter 6 and verse 8. All right. Micah chapter 6 and verse 8. And so you may not have heard of this particular book of the Bible. It's a very not often talked about book of the Bible, but it is a prophet. And this is God talking to the prophet Micah about what God requires of us as believers of Jesus Christ. All right. And so this is God talking. He says, he has shown you, O mortal. A mortal is a human being. So literally God is saying, I have shown you, little boy, little girl, man, woman, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? And these are the three things that God requires of us as Christians, as believers, as followers of Jesus Christ. And that is, 1, to act justly, 2, to love mercy, and 3, to walk humbly with God. And so the first one that we saw is to act justly. And that means that we need to stand for justice. We need to speak out against injustice. And we need to protest and let our voices be heard. All right. So write that down, write that scripture down, and go over it with your parents and with your friends, and ask each other, what do you all think that means? And how does that relate to what we see on TV and on social media with the Black Lives Matter movement and with the protests across the world? All right.
So first we were going to go into the fact that right now we're hearing a lot about Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. What exactly does that mean? And so when Pastor and I were talking about it, some of our kids, you all might be familiar with protests or something called the civil rights movement. If you paid attention in history class, you might have heard about the civil rights movement. Pastor, can you tell us a little bit about the civil rights movement?
So for those who may not know, we, as Black people, African Americans, were brought over from Africa over 400 years ago to be slaves. And so we were liberated, we were emancipated by President Abraham Lincoln in 1865 after the Civil War. But although we as African Americans, our great-great-great-grandparents were emancipated as slaves in 1865, there were still lots of injustices that were going on. So Black people weren't allowed to necessarily own property. They weren't allowed to open businesses. They weren't allowed to move freely or to vote. And so the civil rights movement that came about was to seek further justice and further freedom and rights for African Americans in America, because although we have been given our liberty as slaves, we were not allowed certain freedoms and rights that other people had. So we weren't allowed to vote like white people were. We weren't allowed to live in any community that we wanted to like white people were. And so the civil rights movement was to speak out and to seek remedies or solutions for the injustices that our great grandparents, our grandparents, our aunts and uncles were suffering with during the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s.
And a lot of people are calling the Black Lives Matter movement the 21st century or the modern day civil rights movement, because we're fighting for similar things. We're fighting for equal treatment. So the Black Lives Matter movement would be our modern day civil rights movement, if you're looking to compare it to something. So I've got some historical figures here that I want to see if you guys can identify with me. So take a minute here. You might recognize at least one person that's on the screen. Hopefully you can recognize two, and then there may be one that is a little bit more, a little bit trickier. Okay. Can someone tell me who is the woman in the green circle? Can anyone tell me who is the lady in the green circle? Is there anyone there that may recognize the lady in the green circle? Okay. And let's see. What about the man that is in the red circle in the middle? The man that's in the red circle. Do you recognize him? He's well known. I think we might have a picture like this same picture maybe in our Sunday school building at Kyle's Temple. Mm-hmm. The man in the very center. Yes. The green circle is Rosa Parks.
Yes. Good job.
Thank you. The man in the red circle is Martin Luther King.
Yes,
that's correct. And then the trickier one here is the little girl in the yellow circle. And this is a little trickier because we all benefit from her and what happened with her, but a lot of people don't know who she is. Okay, so let me show you guys who these people are.
I got the first two.
So yes, we've got Rosa Parks. We've got Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and those are two that you all have heard of. You all have heard their names. But then we have Ruby Bridges. Now, Ruby Bridges is a perfect example of this, what happened in the civil rights movement and something that people were protesting. So just to tell you a little bit about Ruby Bridges, around this time, back in around like 1960s, white kids and black kids could not go to school together. So I know your schools are pretty diverse. You have kids of all different cultures. But back then, white kids and black kids had their own schools to go to. And really, they didn't want black kids at the white schools. So back then, they came up with this test. And they said, okay, so if we're going to have to put black kids in our white schools, we want to make sure that these kids are going to be smart. So they came up with this test that the black kids had to take in order to go to the white school. So there were 6 kids that were selected, 6 kids that had passed this test back in 1960, and they were eligible to enroll in the white school. They call it integration. That's the real word for it. But there were 6 kids who were eligible to go to the white school. Ruby, the girl right there in the corner, was the only girl of the 6 that actually enrolled in school. So her first day of school was November 14th, 1960. And on her very first day of school, let me show you guys. She had to be escorted to class by 4 U.S. Marshals. So she had to be escorted to class because people were protesting. They said, keep our school white. They said, keep our school white. They were protesting. They did not want her there. And so I show you that to say, you see people on the news right now, they're protesting. Protesting is not new. This is not a new thing. It's been happening forever. It's how we express our voice and how we let the people know that we want to be heard, and we can do it in a peaceful way. So they were protesting Ruby. They said, we do not want this little black child in our school. And on her first day of school, a lot of white parents actually removed their own kids from the school. They said, if this little black child is going to be in our school, we're taking our kid. We are. My white child won't be going to the school. So so that's just one example of how protesting is not new. I pulled a picture to show you guys what the protests looked like back in 1960s and kind of what the protests are looking like today. So there's similarities. Yes. You see, we have people marching together. men and women, and maybe there was some children out there. They had signs that they were expressing what they wanted the people to hear. So the one that's black and white would be in 1960, and the one that's in the yellow circle is a picture actually from maybe like 1 week ago with the Black Lives Matter protests.
Yes.
So next up, I want to bring on a guest that we made contact with. This guest, his name is Mr. Braswell. He wrote a book called Daddy, There's a Noise Outside. We will share the link to his book, but I'll let him tell you guys about the book and why he wrote the book. But it's called Daddy, There is a Noise Outside. So without further ado.
And before we do that, like, share. This is a very important conversation, and we want to make sure that our children understand what's going on, and certainly to ask their parents or guardians questions if you have them. So we're really wanting to just increase conversation from our babies and from our youth about what's going on in our country and in our world. All right. So please please share so that everyone can be a part of this courageous conversation. And I'm excited about what we're about to watch.
Here we go. Let me just press play. Is the audio? Uh-oh. Hold on, guys. 1 second.
1 second. You get a chance to share.
Yeah, it'll give you a chance to share. Hold on, Pastor. Can you talk for just a second?
Sure.
The video just
So after the video, we're going to talk about some of the principles of the Black Lives Matter movement. So you may not have known, you might just think that these are just people out here wearing shirts and just shouting this out, but this is actually an organization that has principles and rules and regulations. So stay tuned so that we can tell you what the Black Lives Matter movement is all about.
Here we go. And so this is Kenneth Braswell. He is the author of Daddy, There's a Noise Outside.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kenneth Braswell. I am the CEO of Fathers Incorporated here in Atlanta, Georgia. I want to thank everyone from Kyle Temple, KT, I hear you guys are affectionately known as, for asking me to do this. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. This is the first time I've ever done this. And so over the last couple of weeks, I've been asked to create a video, to talk about the book, to read the book. Just have not had the time to do it. But because my heartstring pulled when I got the email from you guys to do this, I just felt like I had to take a moment to stop to talk to you a little bit about this book called Daddy, There's a Noise Outside. And so about 6 years ago, right after another racial incident took place in Baltimore with a young man by the name of Freddie Gray, I was there with another friend. And while I was there in the middle of Jefferson, and I can't remember the cross street, we were amongst military, police, you name it, the same things and the same kind of images that you're seeing now on TV. And my friend, a good friend of mine, David Miller, was being interviewed by CNN, and I just happened to be standing next to him. And while I was standing there, back in Atlanta, my wife and my then 6-year-old son happened to be watching TV, and he saw me on TV. And my son asked my wife, why is Daddy on TV with all of those police? And my wife said to him, wait till Daddy gets home and he'll explain it all to you. Well, a couple of days later, I came home and I wasn't fresh in the door before my son said, Daddy, why were you with all of those police? And I'm sure he had a level of concern about that, even being 6 years old and being small. I think that we all are aware, particularly those of us that are of African-American descent, about the history and how we've been treated by police and how we think about the police. And that was nothing that I taught him that I ever had a conversation with him about, but I'm sure he has seen, heard, is paying the same kind of attention to the news that you guys are paying to the news. That's why it's so important for us to have this conversation. It's why it's so important for your parents to talk to you about this. Well, anyway, when I got settled and I came back out to talk to him, I realized that I had an answer, but what I did not have was an answer for a 6-year-old. And what I decided to do was to talk to him not so much about what was going on, but to talk to him about what was going on. So instead of talking to him about Freddie Gray, I talked to him about protest, and I began to explain to him the meaning of protest. And my illustration to him, as I talked to him about how people respond to things they either agree with or not agree with. You can protest in either one of those ways. You can be a protester and you can voice your opinion based on how you might like something, or you can also voice your opinion in a way that speaks to something that you don't like. And so much of what you're seeing right now around our country are people who are tired. They want to express to those in leadership that they're not happy with how particularly Black communities are being treated by the police. And they have chosen to express that in many different ways. And what you're going to see is you're going to see some people peacefully and quietly protest, and some people are not going to be so quiet in their protests, but they're all there for the same reason. They're there to express a frustration with occurrences that happen, particularly with Black men, but also Black women, and they're voicing their concerns about that happening. And so I created this book. This was actually my first book. You can see it here. And I created the book with a family called the Applewhites. And I wanted to use this family to begin to tell stories in a way that our children could understand very difficult conversations, and to create a tool that parents would be able to use with their children to have these difficult conversations as well. And so this particular book is strictly about protests. It is about making sure that our children understand what it means to protest, their roles in protesting, the different kinds of protests that take place, and how even you as a child can do something to protest in your own way. So what are some of those things that you can do? Well, you can talk to your parents about it, and you can ask your parents questions to talk to you about what you're seeing, and have them explain to you what's going on and what's taking place. The other thing you might find some fun in talking about is asking them whether or not they have ever protested anything, and how they did that and why they did that, and have them share stories with you on their own view of what protesting has done. They could also talk to you about the solutions and some of the impacts that has taken over, the decades, particularly since the civil rights movement, with Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Thurgood Marshall, and do some research, right? Go on your internet and go on to the internet, right? And type in civil rights movement and begin to read about the tens of thousands of individuals just like you that decided to do something about the things that they did not like. And they made changes in their own small way. I know we talk a lot about Dr. Martin Luther King and we talk a lot about Malcolm X, but they were not the only two people who served our community in a way that allowed us to be able to benefit and to be able to take advantage of some of the things that you as youth are able to take care of today, like voting for our families, filling out the census, and engaging in other civic activities. And so for parents, if you're listening to me, let down your guard. have these intimate conversations with your children, because they are aware. They know that something is going on, and they may not have the words to articulate to you what is going on, but use this as an opportunity to be able to talk to them about what they're feeling and what they're seeing and how they're interpreting this. Because it's one thing to have these conversations in the comfort of your home, but another to have these conversations when this all resumes to some level of normalcy and they have to go back into the world and function. And talk about what God says about protests, and what God says about anger, and what God says about love, and what God says about brotherhood and sisterhood and loving thy neighbor. Be able to go into the Bible and grab some parables that can talk about how Jesus even expressed anger by turning over tables, and why he did that, and why anger is not always a bad emotion. The emotion is not good or bad just because of the anger itself, but it's how you respond to it that makes what you do either something good or bad. And so again, this is Kenneth Braswell, my book, Daddy, There's a Noise Outside. And I'm in this office. You can see the piles of books. We have sold over 300 books in the last 3 days. So families and churches and schools across the country are having this conversation. And I'm just blessed and appreciative of being able to spend the time with you guys at KT to talk to you a little bit about our book. Begin to let us know like how this goes, what you're thinking. Talk to me by email. Let me know if there's anything in other conversations we can have. I'm praying for you. I'm cheering for you. I know that as youth, that you're going to grow up to do the best and the right things to make this world a better place for us all. And parents, hang in there. Self-care as well. Take care of yourselves so that you can take care of your families, so that your families can take care of others. And I'm going to leave you like I always like to leave you. Always be kind to others as you're kind to yourself, or you might find yourself by yourself. Shoot high for your goals, because even if you miss, you'll be amongst the stars. And as my good friend and mentor, Art Mitchell, used to always say to me, it's nice to be important, but it's much more important to be nice. Until next time, God bless and be safe.
Let's give Mr. Braswell some hearts. He was awesome.
Yeah, he was
Thank
awesome.
you, Mr. Braswell, for joining us today. We appreciate him for coming on, not just for writing the book, but joining us today in our conversation.
And again, so here's the book. Yes. I will put a link to the book so you can order it. It's $20, and that includes shipping. If you ask me, that is a deal.
Yes.
And it talks all about protesting. But so how many of you have seen signs like this, or have seen like a t-shirt or something that says BLM? BLM stands for Black Lives Matter. It stands for Black Lives Matter. So this is what we're talking about today, what Black Lives Matter means. And it's not just a bunch of Black people that are just out there protesting, that are angry. It's not just that. There are some guiding principles to the Black Lives Matter movement that we wanted to talk to you guys about today. So, first things first, let's start with restorative justice. So we're not going to talk about all of the principles. There's many, but we're just going to introduce you guys to 4 principles that really are concepts that kids can grasp when it comes to Black Lives Matter. Okay. So the first one is restorative justice. Restorative justice is a commitment to build a beloved and loving community that's sustainable and growing. It means helping people when something happens, even if that something happened on accident. Okay. So one example that we had is that if you, all right, we haven't been able to go on vacation, so let's take it to the beach. We're on the beach. Someone built a beautiful sand castle, and you are throwing a frisbee on the beach, and you knock over their castle, right? Sometimes an apology is not enough. Sometimes, so restorative justice means I'm gonna help you build your castle back. I'm not just gonna say sorry. I knocked it down. I wasn't paying attention. Even though it was on accident, I'm sorry is not enough. So I'm going to help you. I'm going to restore what I messed up.
Yes.
So now we got empathy.
All right.
You wanna do that one?
Yes. Empathy is a connection with others by building relationships built on trust and understanding. So what you're seeing now is a great model of empathy, because in a lot of protests, and we're in Sacramento, Elk Grove, Roseville, even in Atlanta, New York City, Houston, Dallas, Los Angeles, there are many different people that are coming alongside African Americans or Black people to protest racial injustice. So empathy is people of all Asians, Caucasians, which are white people, African Americans, Latinos, coming together to build relationship so that we all together can build a better community. It can't be just one race of people. So it can't just be Black people protesting, but it takes the entire world coming together, empathizing with each other, understanding each other, and then speaking out for each other so that everyone has the same opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. And just to add on to that, it kind of means like, just because bad things, unfortunate things are happening to Black people, there's white people who are our allies that say, you're my brother or sister, and I can imagine what that would feel like if I were you. And that's empathy. I can imagine what that would be like if I was in your shoes. So I'm going to stand with you and fight this injustice. So now we've got loving engagement. Now, this is a commitment to practice justice, liberation, and peace. So it's important to make sure we always try to be fair and peaceful. And we have to keep practicing this in order to get better at it. So we want to strive to be fair and peaceful. And these are, again, Black Lives Matter, some of their guiding principles that work for kids to kind of grasp and understand.
Right. And the last one is Black villages. All right. So this is a disruption of Western family dynamics and a return to collective villages that take care of each other. So what Black Lives Matter really want, not just for the government or the world to give us rights, but for us as African Americans to come together to build community and to build villages together where we support each other, where we're not killing each other, where we're not downing each other or being negative towards one another, but we're loving each other as Black people, building each other up, building up our communities to make them the place where we want to live and thrive as African Americans in the world. Absolutely.
And Black villages also has to do with the Black family. And what Black Lives Matter wants people to know, what they're trying to instill in people, especially young people, is that not all families look the same. Not all families have one mom, one dad, one kid. Families are looking so different these days. Sometimes they got one mom, got one dad, grandmas are raising people, aunts, uncles. So families don't necessarily look like the families that we saw in books that we read in school. Families are different. And what happens is when all of these different unique families come together, we call that a village. So that's what creates the Black villages. All of our unique families that can come together to create the Black village. So these are just a couple for you guys to just start kind of thinking about, start talking about. We got restorative justice, empathy, loving engagement, and Black villages.
You can also find the other ones on blacklivesmatter.org. I believe that's the right address, the right email, URL. But just Google Black Lives Matter, and you can read about all of the principles that are included in the Black Lives Matter movement. Because these are just four. But there's so many. And if you don't know what they mean, ask your parents. You can text me or First Lady, and we can have a discussion about it so that we all have an understanding about what we need in this world to be a better world.
Exactly. I do want to highlight a program that's going to be on TV tomorrow.
Yes.
Sesame Street is having a town hall, coming together, standing up against racism. It's Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern time. So unfortunately, it's 7 a.m. Pacific time on CNN and CNN.com/Sesame Street. But it's going to be about embracing diversity, being more empathetic and understanding. So again, that is on tomorrow on CNN. I'm sure that they'll have a playback because that's kind of early for the Pacific side of the world. But we hope you all enjoyed our lesson and the conversation that we're having today. It's not just about these signs and protesting downtown. It's not just about the signs.
Right.
It's deeper than that. And we just wanted to introduce this to our kids that there are core principles, there are core values to this movement. It's more than just a large group of people walking downtown,
holding up signs.
It's more than that. So,
and it is rooted in the Bible. Again, that's
yeah.
Micah chapter 6 and verse 8, that God requires us to do justice. And so what you're seeing across the world is biblical. God wants us to stand up for the oppressed, for the suppressed, for those who are being mistreated, and for those who are being put down. God requires us as human beings and as believers of him to speak up for those whose voices have been silenced.
That's right. So again, we will put a link to Mr. Braswell's book in the comments. That way you can take a look and decide if you want to go ahead and order that. But we want to just thank you all for watching and just for being open-minded and being willing to talk to your kids about this topic. All right.
And again, if you have any questions, reach out to someone, ask them, and see how you can participate if you so choose. But let's all work together to make our community, our cities, and our nation a better place for all people and not just for one group of people.
Amen. All right.
Black Lives Matter.
All right. Bye, you guys. See you next week.